Welcome back. Today is April 27th, 2026, and I have the great pleasure of being joined by Alastair Crooke, who is a renowned British diplomat and negotiator who worked for decades on addressing conflicts in the Middle East. Alastair Crooke is also the founder and director of the Conflicts Forum, and the link to this great Substack can be found in the description. So thank you very much for coming back on the program.
Thank you. Thank you. Always a pleasure to join you.
So it seems that we are, in the risk of a greater war with both Iran and Russia. But I thought we can start with Iran. First of all, there's a lot of confusion here. That is, are the peace negotiations still going on? Is the ceasefire actually still here? But overall, I also see the problem of how we can end this war. That is the United States seeking an end to the Iran war? And if so, what do you think is the possible off-ramp or exit strategy of the United States?
Well, there is a lot of propaganda and there's a lot of confusion. Most of it is propaganda. A lot of it is propaganda. So, okay, because there has been a substantive change take place, and we ought to try and understand that. But first of all, to say that there was never a proposal for Arachi to meet with Kushner or with Koch in Islamabad. This was a fantasy created by Trump, but it was not, doesn't refer to any plans or proposals. Trump has said very clearly, there was really no point to having any talks with them until they get their act together and produce a plan of what they want. We don't know what they want. But of course he does, because what Iran wants was spelled out very clearly in the 10-point plan that was given to the Americans before the Islamabad talks, in which Trump said was a realistic basis for discussion, if you recall, at that time. So they have put out very clearly in those 10 points the negotiating position, and they haven't changed for it except now. And for some time, I've been saying, and I looked through and reread the JCPOA, even though I've been one way or another dealing with it for more than 20 years. I reread it and I looked at that and I thought, what on earth would Iran want to go back to that? It's like, being on parole from prison. You've been on parole for a week's leave, and then, the prison gate is opening and you're going to go back into your cage. I mean, not a literal cage, but a cage. You've been surrounded by American military bases everywhere. The cage of sanctions, of tariffs, of UN resolutions, of IEA inspections. I mean, would you want to go back to that? And what's happened over the last few days, and what Arachi's been busy with, what he went to Pakistan to do, was to tell them their new negotiation principles, which are basically simply not that different, except one bombshell difference. They're not prepared to discuss the nuclear issue. They're not prepared to discuss it until they have resolved the points about the war, about the blockade of Hormuz, about the attacks on them and on Iranians, and also the sanctions that are being imposed. Their tankers are being seized and or arrested and seized by U.S. officials. So they said, this is it for the moment. These are the things we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss Hormuz, and we're going to discuss ceasefire or not. may not be. And we're going to discuss the ending of the attacks on us and on others, like Hezbollah in Lebanon. So we're going to deal with that. Maybe later we'll talk about nuclear issues. That's what they say. And Khalifa did a tweet, I think, last night, and he said, Iran, Trump keeps saying he has all the cars, but listen to our cars. One is Hormuz. We control Hormuz and will continue. We are able to control Bab al-Mandab and the Red Sea, and we can control pipelines. And what have they got on the other side? Well, they got a naval blockade. And the question really, he didn't put it in these terms, but I'm saying, which is the shorter timeline? The timeline between the Iranian blockade, which is possible, it's open to specific vessels, but what is the timeline between that creating serious damage in the Western economy and the timeline of the Trump American naval blockade, which is not very much observed, which is really quite porous? Vessels have been passing throughout this time. How long before that puts real pain on Iran? And the answer is contrary to what Trump believes, that, after the 26th of April yesterday, Iran's oil supplies, it's all going to crash and they'll be broke. It's not true. I mean, first of all, Iran is continuing to get tankers out by following the coast very closely into territorial waters, getting their tankers out, loaded tankers out. They have been earning more in a month of the war. They're earning twice what they ever earned in the best years beforehand. Just one day, four tankers leaving Cargill a little while ago produced an income with 7.5 million barrels of oil, produced an income of just under $1 billion, $815 million. They have oil at sea. They have something, before the war, they put 200 million barrels at sea. They have 130 left, I think. 100 to 130. So they can go on for months, really. And in any case, it's a misunderstanding of the nature of Iran and the nature of their strategy to think they're about to capitulate or to surrender. And we can go into the reasons for that. But they are not just the usual nation state that you take out a baseball bat and you bash them and you take away all their money, and then they'll come on their knees and beg for your indulgence. So, Iran is in many ways a very different vehicle. It started as a revolt against Western modernity with the influence of, say, Crooke and others, but it was always a civilizational state, civilizational and a revolutionary state, and not just a sort of 19th century linear autocratic nation that tried to enforce a national identity. They deliberately didn't enforce a national identity, and they felt, Islam was a civilizational element in it. So I think that, the calculation the Iranians feel is in their favor. And I don't think they are thinking of, I don't know that. I admitted clearly, I don't know whether they intend ultimately, if they got the right deal, to talk about the nuclear issue. I don't think there's any chance of Iran handing over 430 kilos of enriched uranium to the American ever. But so we're in a slightly new era, which is why I think there's meetings going on in Washington, because the Trump's hope, I think, for finding a quick and solution um, to this conflict are evaporating. I know there are people who feel that a solution could be put together. I don't see a path to a solution, and I can explain why if you would like me to.
Actually, yeah, that's my next question. I was gonna ask what stands, what prospects are for negotiated settlement. But yeah, first, this you described the yeah, returning to the JCPOA as a, yeah, almost a prison, and it does feel like this is the war objectives of Iran, though that is a prison break in which Hormuz, the control of Hormuz, is essentially the main instrument towards this end, because if they have Strait of Hormuz, where they can set up a toll, set conditions for transit, essentially the countries who put sanctions on Iran, who threatens it with war by hosting bases or actually attacking, all of them can be, well, to some extent disciplined if they want to have proper access. So it seems very critical for Iran, if they don't want to go back to the past decades of crippling sanctions and the threat of war all the time, that that the Strait of Hormuz is not non-negotiable. But so I wanted to ask how you see the possibility, therefore, of an actual negotiated settlement. But in making matters more complicated, you can throw in Israel's territorial ambitions and, of course, the desire to, well, crack Lebanon like it did Syria. So how do you see, yeah, the possibility of actually meeting halfway somewhere in a negotiation?
Well, going back to what you just said, I would just add to it. I'm sure you intended it, but we've seen supply lines are beginning. There's a sort of rumbling of catastrophe already apparent, because various crucial elements to our supply line pass through almost, as well as oil and gas, helium, sulfuric acid, gallium, all of these things pass through. And, what happens is that they go on getting slightly worse, and then they break. And when they break, we in the West are going to feel the consequences uh, directly. That there won't be petrol in the petrol stations or gasoline in the gasoline stations. There will be difficulty getting our children to school as a consequence. There will not be the food that you want. You will not have aluminium foil in the shops any longer. Aluminium comes through Hormuz overwhelmingly. So, I mean, it is, we're in this never world at the moment that we all have heard that it's going to be so serious, yet it hasn't fully impacted. In Australia, it has. In Ireland, it has, where the protests about not being able to get cars fueled. But it's about to. All the sort of economic experts of the West are saying the saying. So what I'm trying, why I'm saying that I don't think there's a path through this, well, certainly not in, one that's going to be very easily achieved, is that there are two major roadblocks in this process. And the first major roadblock is Trump. I mean, I'm not just talking about his mental state, which we all know is a contributory, and a dominant factor, because he still, runs the show in at the White House. He hasn't been, not like Biden, that he's largely removed from it. He's very much in control of it. in control, I say loosely in control, but nonetheless, he likes to present himself as being there. But more than that is that, the roots of this, in many ways, in his feeling about Iran, has been his um, dislike of Obama and the sense of rivalry that he's always felt with Obama. So what he's always said was that Obama's JCPOA was terrible, it was awful, it was defective, and I can do much better. But he needs something like that, a better JCPOA than Obama, to prove that Trump was the better negotiator. There's a long history to this sort of bitter rivalry. And when you look at this, I mean, even before what I said at the beginning about the change in tactic, I mean, there wasn't going to be a better JCPOA coming out of this. It would be, if there was a JCPOA 2, it would be more favorable for the Iranians than the first one. Otherwise, there would be none. So it would have to be more favorable. And that would not go well with Trump, nor would it go well with Netanyahu. And so the first thing is, the only thing that could really assuage him, and he and Vance recognized that was the one thing that could do it, would be the Iranians would suddenly hand over 430 kilos of enriched uranium, and he would hold it up like, a trophy, a football trophy at the end of a game, and say, "Look, I've won, we've succeeded, there'll never be a nuclear weapon." Well, I don't think Iran is going to do that, because they realize this is a great asset in these negotiations, and they're not going to hand it over. But also, Trump didn't like it when Vance started talking from Islamabad. By all the reports we hear, was that, when Vance was saying, well, yes, they will continue to charge a fee on Hormuz, and they will have control over it, and they'll share it with Oman, etc. Trump was like, but then they will become more powerful. Iran will become one of the big states, because if they control Hormuz and get fees for the next, half year or a year, I mean, they'll have money rolling in. So supposing Vance went back to these talks with, with his two minders, Kushner and Witkoff. If he went back and he came back and said, "Look, we've got a deal on 3.67 enrichment, and the timeline would be extended, and there would be monitoring and all of that," would Trump say, "Okay," or would he say, "But this isn't a win for me, because this is just the JCPOA. This is Obama's JCPOA, and this doesn't show that I've achieved anything." So I think there's a real problem there. And of course, there's still the other problem of his mental condition. I think various people have spoken at some length who've got more direct knowledge. Robert Barnes and others have explained how it's more than just being erratic. It's a sense of confabulation taking place, of huge anger and temper, unable to take criticism, unable to really understand what's going on. I mean, very serious. And so one question is, well, how would the team manage this if things get worse? How would they manage Trump? Not the conflict, but how would they manage Trump? I mean, it seems from the reporting that not this Saturday, but the Saturday before, General Kane said no. And it seems even this last Saturday, when there was a meeting about Iran, there was some sort of agreement by the team when there was a proposal for further mass bombing of electricity and infrastructure. All of them, maybe bar one, said, no, this is a war crime. This is not permitted. We cannot accept this. Can this continue? I don't know. I mean, you'd have to ask someone better equipped in the American field for how long can this go on like this? Because there's no real way I can see for them to change that so easily. I mean, the 25th Amendment is, I mean, it's unlikely to be possible. Are they going to be prepared to go down the route of some sort of indictment? I don't know. But this is the second reason I say it's this is the first barrier that I described to coming to some sort of agreement is, if it's not about the nuclear, what would it be? I mean, the next stage then would be possibly not for another attempt to go to Isfahan and take out, if it's ready in Isfahan, to go and take out the enriched material from Isfahan. After what happened, I mean, it was, a Joe Kent keeps telling him, well, if you go on like this, you end up being like Jimmy Carter after Jimmy Carter's disastrous attempt to rescue the hostages from Iran, the hostages seized in the embassy there by Iran. And when the helicopters crashed, you remember it was a disaster. He lost in the presidency. So Kent keeps telling him that, and I think it hurts. So I don't know that they'll do that. Well, that only leaves what's there? Bombing, carpet bombing. And it hasn't succeeded in destroying Iran's missile capabilities. So we're talking about either just repeating bombing mountains pretty pointlessly, or it will be more likely just bombing civilian infrastructure in Iran, killing people, knocking down blocks of apartments, which you have to ask the lawyers if that's going to be considered a war crime or not. Anyway, maybe he will double down and say, well, I've got to put pressure on them. They've got to agree, because otherwise my chances for the midterms are fading very, very fast. We've really got to, put pressure. And so I don't really see what it is that Trump could, obtain from these events. Iran is not about to, fully open. I was listening to some of the sort of Gulf states, and they said, we can't have tolls there. They must be open. It must be without tolls. We can't accept that. It's not possible, which is one of the reasons why the Pakistanis, of course, are very close to Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia, can't have tolls on Hormuz. It's got to be as it used to be before on the 27th February. Come on. What do you mean? You don't like toast. Nor do I. I used to be able to read newspapers without paying anything. You go into online and you could read them, and then suddenly there was a subscription and a toll posted on it. And of course, I got used to, reading them for free. And it's always an adjustment, painful adjustment when you have to pay it. If I drive a car on the motorway here, I have to pay toll. Grow up. This is how things are. And that proposal to put a toll is, I'm not a lawyer, but I think is legal under the UN Treaty on Law of the Seas, because all of Hormuz, the actual Strait of Hormuz, is within Iran's territorial water or Oman's territorial water on the other side. There's no international water there at all. It's too narrow. So they will continue with us, I believe, and so this doesn't offer a very easy solution for Trump to deal with. His um, his uh, barricade, his naval barricade, is porous. Um, Iranian vessels are going in and they're coming out. We've seen that. Lloyd's Shipping put it in the Financial Times, and I think Trump was rather angry that it's dead sort of 30 Iranian ships in the last few days. This was a few days ago, had traversed the straits at this time. So where is the solution other than sort of bombing, which won't be a solution because it won't cause the Iranians to come back? I mean, one of the things that is so clear is the change in atmosphere in 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 Iraq. I mean, there is a new energy, a new sense of the revolution, updated. It's the young more than the sort of older generations who participated in the revolution. No, these are youngsters. These are great columns of young women armed to the teeth going out onto the streets every night in support of the Iranian state. I mean, it's something that is going to have long-term impacts, I believe, beyond Iran, in places like Russia and China too. That's what I hear. That this sort of robust expression of a rejection of one reality and the determination to find and achieve their own sovereignty. And that makes it, is also acting against an agreement with America. You ask the young, I mean, you can see it. It's on the many of the videos. You ask them about what they see the future, and they say, "Why are we negotiating with America at all? Why are our leadership talking to them? Why, when they bombing our houses and our schools and our hospitals?" No. So the mood is hardening at another level as well, which is important. It's not reflected in the Western, media and their understanding. But you've only got to look at the videos and the evidence is there. I mean, you see these columns of women going out to defend bridges and power stations and so on, when they feel they're threatened. And then you come to the second barricade. Supposing you find a solution with Trump, how do you find a solution with Israel? And I wrote a paper for this in our Substack about how Israel had changed. And some 15 years ago, I said you cannot go understanding Israel through sort of secular, rational, enlightenment type of structures. You have to understand that it's becoming a conflict of religious poles in the Middle East. And it really has changed further in that direction. Because what we see, Israel has now become much more messianic, apocalyptic, eschatological. 70% basically of the Jewish Israelis support this. And the most important thing, I think, was, it's not some passing moment that is going to come and go with the elections, and then we'll have us back to an Ashkenazi secular regime, because as the great Jewish historian Gershom Scholem has written, messianism has been a very important impasse in the Jewish faith over the years, from the 1600s and the 19th century, with Jacob Brandt and others. And he predicted from some years ago that religious Zionism, which is, he said, he predicted in recent decades has aligned with Likud and the settlement, and this is him, I'm quoting him, operates as a militant, apocalyptic, and radical messianic movement that tries to force the end by demanding that the state engage in, for example, massive territorial control. I.e., this is him quoting, they demand territorial conquest for end of times reasons. So forcing the end is about forcing redemption and the messianic age coming into being. So my point about this was, if you go back to the Reagan administration when they tried to, and to a certain extent, succeed in imposing a restraint from Israel, is this likely in the new atmosphere of Israel? I mean, are they going to accept restraint because that might be in America's interest? And it is in America's interest, let's be quite clear. Of course, it's in America's interest. They don't want the whole Middle East set alight in a sort of move towards Armageddon. They don't want that, so that they call for restraint. But look, is it reasonable to think that that's going to happen? I think not. Because I think, and if you listen to the latest statement by Katz, threatening everything against, that Israel will attack this disgusting country of Iran, will move it, I mean, the language was extraordinary. It was purely apocalyptic language coming out from the defense minister of Israel. So I don't think restraint is going to be possible, and it's not possible because in Israel, Netanyahu's under huge pressure because the people are saying, well, your war on Iran failed. It didn't achieve any of its objectives. And your war on Hezbollah, which you told us was all successful, so successful, Hezbollah had been eliminated. Now we find it was never true. And you tell us that the war on Iran is going to be a great success. It's not true. So he is in dire trouble. So he needs the success. And so what you see in the press, in Israel press, even today, this morning, we have to get the Americans to continue the war. Is this in the American interest? I doubt it. But this is in the, if you like, the messianic interest of Israel to get the U.S. to continue the war. And so what's going to happen? Well, when you look at it, when there is the divergence of interest between the United States, who I would argue actually the interest of the Republican Party, the interest of Trump personally, is to find a solution to an end to the war. And that is the American interest, largely. Not everyone in America agrees with that. Mark Levin won. But if you put it aside, I mean, I would say, actually, at the end of the day on this, Israel doesn't give a damn about America, and it doesn't give a damn for the Gulf states either. It has something which surpasses all those rational, mechanistic strategies of saying, but it's not in your, I mean, surely it's not in Israel's interest to go to a major war with Iran. Well, I remember Smotrich 6 or 7 years ago in the video to the Likud, which I watched then. And he said, listen, this was the plan. We're going to, get rid of all the Arabs from the land of Israel. But I have to tell you, to do this, to complete the plan, we have to have, we need a major crisis or a big, big war. And then we will finish the plan. In other words, to tell them that if you do something silly, you'll get you'll get Armageddon. They want Armageddon. This is they see this as a path towards salvation, redemption. So I find it very difficult to see, a simple path. I don't think, the idea that Iran can be persuaded by Russia and China to go back to a JCPOA type prison um, is now on the cards, and now Iran has said on the record publicly, no, we're not talking a nuclear issue. Now we're talking Hormuz, and we're talking economic costs, and we're talking about sanctions and tariffs, and this is going to be the discussion. Maybe if all that's resolved, who knows, we can talk the nuclear issue again.
Yeah, so, well, that's not the United States, but I saw von der Leyen from the European Union making the point that sanctions will not come off Iran because of, values. The regime has to change this and that. And it's intended to sound very principled, but it also comes off as, well, delusional at times. But they do the same with China and Russia. That is, uh, they if they fail to achieve anything, I think part of it is because there's difficulty in transitioning to a multipolar world because they, being what they want to get, they, it prevents them from seeing what they actually can get or how they want the world to be. They fail to see how the world actually is, and they often frame it in morality. Yeah,
That's my point about mechanistic sort of secular thinking. That is so embedded in their particular grasp of reality that they're completely incapable of seeing that others have different ways of thinking and see reality from a different perspective. And they can't understand that. And of course, this is why I said I can't see Iran going back to this GCPOA agreement, because they know. I mean, we're talking 47 years was the first sanctions put on. They're never going to be lifted, not while Israel has any say. And of course, von der Leyen is representing Israel as much as anyone else in this process. No, of course, there must be containment, sanctions, siege on Iran, break the Iranian spirit. And that's gets also some support from Gulf states, but principally from Israel and from elements within the United States. So this is why I keep saying, Iran's aim in this war is to break the whole paradigm, mash the paradigm of putting Iran, you put it in the words of the jailbreak. Exactly.
Just a final question then. It seems like this is then a war of attrition, both in the military sense, but also economic. That is, who can absorb the most pain, and of course inflict pain on the other side. Do you think it's clear, though, that the time is on the side of the Iranians, or how do you see? Because it seems all sides are under great pressure now.
Oh, no, the time is on the side of the Iranians in an unqualified way. They have been, they have been making more money during this war. I mean, revenues. I don't keep talking about businessmen, but money, revenues to the state has come in far, far high since they've had control of the state, almost Strait of Hormuz and Charles Peace money. And the Iran is not short of money, and it has, more probably 130 million barrels of oil still at sea, on the sea, that they will sell, or gradually they can keep going for a long time. They may start charging fees for passage through the Bab al-Manda Strait too. Um, the whereas we in the West are closer, and as I say, I don't think people have appreciated that we have about 2 weeks before it's going to really hit. And when it hits, you know, people won't be able to afford to fly. They won't be able to easily get their cars refueled. I mean, there are many things. The cost of electricity and things are going to go shooting up. Um, and Europe is going to be in dire pain. I live here in Italy, and there's a huge cost of living crisis. There has been no increase in real wages since Italy joined the euro. No increase in real incomes since then. That's a long, long time to sort of squeeze and squeeze and squeeze down. And people, when they're being the protest and the trade unionists say, how do you expect people to go on when the income that they're getting has run out by week 3 of a month, and they have 4 weeks in a month? I mean, it's just not working. So I think the pain is going to come uh, very much. The economic elites, the ones that are trading. But I just want to say one thing, if you've got a minute before, I know you want to finish, but I would just say that this is also something much bigger. It is, and this is why it's part of a global war. The other thing that Iran is fighting in this war is, if you like, the financial architecture, not just the dollar hegemony, not just the petrodollar, but the whole structure by which the Gulf states were sort of set up in 73, keep the oil price high and transfer the enormous excess savings that came from this into Wall Street. And this underpinned the financialized world that we live in, which incidentally is the source of much of our problems, because it's come at the price of if you like, depressing or suppressing the real economy in favor of an economy that is all about trading, about making instant money on markets, but not by actually producing things in the real world. It's much quicker. You can make a few hundred million in an afternoon by trading, insider trading on the markets. And one of the things that I think is going to be a long-term consequence of this war is the consequence of the complete destruction of markets and pricing that's taken place as a result of all of this insider trading, of this, complete disparities that people can see for themselves. We pick up the paper and they say, oh, well, oil has just gone down, from 98 to 93. Try buying a barrel of oil at that price. It's just completely manipulated. If you want to buy a barrel of oil, um, you're going to have to pay over 200. Sri Lanka has just been paying well over 200 to get oil just to keep going. And so what's pricing? What are markets? What is this market that says the price of oil is 93 when you actually have to pay double that price to get a real bulk, physical oil that you can put into the system and keep it running? It's, this is going to be a huge, have a huge impact. So Iran, that's why the Iranians are saying, I'm sorry, but if you want to have the relations with Iran, you've got to get rid of Microsoft and Amazon and all of your links. We don't want that type of economic umbrella which has suffocated us and been antagonistic to us since for 47 years. The 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 umbrella of the hegemony of the dollar and the hegemony of the military, coupled with a hegemony of a financialized world, coupled with, if you like, the sense of the control of the UN, the IEA, and all these structures that are employed against Iran. So I think that is, that it has this global aspect.
No, that's interesting. Well, I don't think Trump expected that this war, which was supposed to be a quick Venezuela-like operation, would turn out into a war which could bring down the American-led world order. It's yeah, quite a dramatic development. Anyways, thank you very much as always for taking the time.
Always a pleasure to join you.